The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB-TV.
Right. Get yourselves together. Right. Stand up and live your life. Right. Get yourselves together. Right. Hands up high.
Welcome to the Rise Above show. I am Joe Perroni.
And I'm Heidi Mancini. And we want to take a moment to thank Joe McDonough from Joe McDonough Family Insurance, Allstate Insurance. His phone number is 684-6989. And his email is joemcdonough@allstate.com. And he's located at 3665 South Fort Apache Road, Suite 105, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89147. So if your family's looking for insurance, family insurance, life insurance, car insurance, he's the guy to call, and he sponsors the Rise Above show, and we appreciate that very much.
Excellent. So we have a very special guest today. His name is Graeme Daniels. He's a marriage and family therapist from California, and he, of course, is going to tell us a little bit more about what he does. So welcome, Graeme. Can you hear me?
I'm good, Joe. Good to be on the show.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So, so you're also an author, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Tell us about that. How many books you got?
Oh, wow. Well, I have self-published, let me see, 6 novels and 1 nonfiction. I have another nonfiction in the works about the subject we're going to be talking about, and I also published in 2016 a paper about, get this title, Object Relations, Attachment Theory, and the Disorder of the Self within the rock opera Tommy.
Excellent.
And that was published in the Journal of Culture and Psychology, again, spring of 2016.
Now, what made you want to do that? Because I know, as a marriage and family therapist, I can see why you would want to do it if you're a Who fan, but does this really... does it connect with some of our peers, do you think?
Well, it came about because I was in a study group around about a decade ago in which, as part of a teaching tool, and sort of in the tradition of what's called bibliotherapy,
right,
a colleague was talking about notable themes of psychology, particularly those relating to attachment theory in the arts. And this person was a big Shakespeare fan, so he was talking about Hamlet and things like that. And I asked this person, had they ever considered more contemporary works, and I cited Tommy, and was talking about some of the ideas within it, and this person was impressed, and they encouraged me to write a paper about it, which I did, and it kind of went from there. And over time, I kind of embellished it to see that as the more I thought about this, you know, iconic piece of music, that it's, I think, meaningful to a lot of people, I saw more and more important themes within it that inform our profession, if you like.
Right. So you're doing conferences now and speeches.
I've done a couple of conferences, yeah. One in 2017 in Santa Fe that had a title, get this, it's kind of relevant, the Creativity and Madness Conference, which was a delightful title, you know, for a conference where I was going to talk about Tommy. And I also did a talk at a local cultural event center here in San Francisco, the Bay Area is where I'm from, at the beginning of this year.
So how has your work been received so far?
Well, the people who attend or listen or read my paper tend to be, you know, enthusiastic. They tend to be interested. It tends to stir a little discussion, specifically in the areas around object relations theory, attachment theory. You know, we can talk about trauma as well, but that you'll find when we talk is kind of an umbrella term here. So it bears a little defining as we talk about it.
You know, I want to say one thing about it. The thing with Tommy for me is, honestly, I grew up, I did not know The Who, and I've become exposed to The Who since being with Joe. And one of the things, when I saw Tommy probably 20 years ago myself, I can honestly say I didn't get it. And I did, and I just thought, oh, that was kind of different and cool, whatever. But I didn't, see the meaning in it. And I was talking to Joe about it, that some of the things that are like work of arts or things that become iconic usually become understood like years either after the person's deceased or time goes on before people actually get the meaning of it, of what Peter Townsend's purpose was behind that movie. And I saw the interview last night, Joe, and I watched that you had with him, and he even himself said that when he was producing that he did not, it was kind of not a goofy thing, but he didn't realize the relevance and what he was doing it with his own childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And until he started to look at it later and realized that he was making a work of art. But honestly, I don't think a lot of people even understand Tommy unless you're in the psychological counseling type world, if that makes sense. Or no?
I do agree with that statement. I think what I'll add to it is I think one of the reasons Tommy is famous, and not just as a piece of music, is because I do think that people, sort of on an unconscious level, get that when, Peter Townsend was writing about this iconic deaf, dumb, and blind boy, and there are references to, mirrors in the opera and blindness as a metaphor for denial,
Mm-hmm.
which, is as old as, say, the myth of Oedipus Rex, which, is a Greek myth that informs psychoanalysis. I think people on an intuitive level, recognize that there is a meaning, even though they can't quite pinpoint, what it is.
Right.
And that's what, my paper and the book I've been writing kind of speaks to in the way. I think it might be useful, Joe and Heidi, if I kind of sketch the story of Tommy, maybe for your listeners, and they can maybe begin to understand what it's about. What do you think?
Well, I think personally, coming from a layman, because I'm not a therapist, I'm a stylist / personal trainer, wellness coach myself. So I don't have a master's degree. I don't have the background that you and Joe have. So I'm speaking in terms of people that don't have your background. Yeah, that would be probably to do a sketch on it and outline so that people kind of know what they're listening to, what they're watching. And I do agree that at some level we all kind of relate to it as young adults or adults. But I can also say I think children would not get that. Like like a younger child, if this was being used in a form of a therapy for trauma children that are young, cognitively, and I know that much about it, their brains are not developed and there's certain things that aren't there. I'm not sure that a young child might benefit from that, but I do believe that teenagers and adults could totally relate to that, because a lot of these abuses that we go through as children, I went through some abuse myself and I didn't even realize it until I was much older and raising my own daughter and going through some, things with her that I was like, there was a lot of things that happened in my childhood that I didn't realize were dysfunctional, but I managed to adapt. I got, I survived it. Like Peter Townsend even said in there, he survived a lot of things. But you go through life and you survive, and I didn't really think much of it until I started raising my daughter and there's a lot of things I don't want her to go through that I went through. So I tried to make a conscious way of, being, I guess, a better parent or being a more aware parent, I guess.
Well, I think I agree, Heidi, with your statement that this wouldn't be particularly useful for, let's say, preteen children. I agree that it would be better for an older or an adult age group, more as a tool of reflection,
Mm-hmm.
Something that would stir thought about childhood rather than something that would stir the mind of a child per se.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, so Graeme, one of my experiences is I would say I was 11 years old. And I couldn't tell why I felt what I felt, but the first time I heard that refrain of Roger Daltrey singing "See Me, Feel Me," there was something about that was so close to me somehow, and I really couldn't even figure it out until I got much older. But it definitely stirred some ideas in my head. So I was wondering, what you think about that, because I was thinking "See Me, Feel Me" is essentially what happens when we're in the presence of another human being that's in any good relationship, whether we're trying to do therapy with somebody or just have a romantic relationship or any type of relationship. What do you think?
Well, I think the see me, feel me, touch me, heal me refrain that appears several times in the opera is at once a kind of primal yearning, of, if you like, almost an infantile cry out. And at the same time, it's a kind of expression of an adult of, heal the wound that is very old. You hear it in the words, and in particular, in the almost childlike way that Roger Daltrey, who, by the way, rarely sounded childlike when he sang,
True.
Sings that see me, feel me lines. And that last line of heal me, it's like saying, heal this old wound that is quite primal within me. And I think something about that refrain, touched something like that idea in people.
Yeah, and I would also add that the first time, I was very young too, my mom took me to go see the Woodstock movie. And I actually saw The Who, with the video. The masculinity of Roger Daltrey, and to be able to say those words, see me, feel me, it probably, I think for me, made it the first time that it was okay as a boy who really wanted to be big, wanted to be a man. It was okay to be vulnerable, because if he was masculine and muscular and the leader of like the world's biggest rock band, if he was able to be vulnerable, then maybe I could too.
Yeah.
Did any of that hit you like that too, or was it different?
Yeah, very much so.
So I think it's difficult to talk about Tommy without going back to the beginning. Whereas in the movie, I think it was World War I, but the book, the record was from World War I, but I think the movie was from World War II.
The movie was World War II. The World War I was the original context, I think, because Townsend's sort of encoding his own childhood there.
Right.
Talking about World War I instead of World War II. But I think people, particularly after the movie, are getting that he's talking about his own early childhood experience.
Right. So when we're talking about deaf, dumb, and blind, one of the questions that comes up for me, so I'm going to give it to you. Where does the deaf, dumb, and blind really start when you think about it?
Well, you hear from time to time people who occasionally talk about Tommy. You hear occasionally that people think that deaf, dumb, and blind is some organic neurological condition, rather like autism or something.
Right.
And Peter Townsend himself might have, at times in interviews, implied that Tommy is born deaf, dumb, and blind, but that's quite incorrect, actually, if you read the lyrics.
True.
The story, if I'll sketch a bit of the story, and it'll make sense of your question, Joe. Tommy starts as an action right at the outset of World War I, 1914.
Right.
And the opening lines illustrate the opening drama. Captain Walker, that's Tommy's father, is missing. Captain Walker didn't come home. His unborn child would never know him. And the narrative is fairly thin at the beginning. We don't really learn much of Tommy's early years. You're meant to imagine, the backdrop of World War I, and his mother's a single parent, and, what is all that like? And now the action picks up in 1921. That's an alternative title of the next song, in which the father, Captain Walker, apparently returns, and he observes that Tommy's mother has taken a lover, and an altercation follows, and we infer that the lover is killed. We have to infer because actually the lyricism is ambiguous. Some people have thought that a flaw in Tommy. I actually think it's part of the album's magic. And more importantly, Tommy is given this message by his parents. You didn't hear it, you didn't see it, you won't say nothing to no one. So it's important to understand that, Tommy is a kind of a Hamlet. He's witnessed a crime, and more importantly, he's told it didn't happen, stop thinking about it even. So it's that twofold trauma of, a horrible event plus secrecy.
Right.
And the very next song, Amazing Journey, is what introduces the deaf, dumb, and blind condition. So I think it's implicit that the condition is psychosomatic, and it's rooted in the message that Tommy is given about the horrors that he has witnessed. You didn't see it, you didn't hear it, you won't say nothing, hence you are deaf, you are dumb, you are blind. So that's what I think is the reason for the condition. It's an expression of, you might think, a protest against that twofold trauma, the crime and the secrecy that surrounds it.
Right. So let's go even a little bit further if we can, because I'm thinking in terms of childhood trauma, we can start maybe with the parents themselves, right? Because we're talking about the war. So we have the lover who's not fighting in the war, but he's there. And we have the mother who's obviously, they probably have PTSD symptoms. So we have two parents that are obviously extremely stressed. So I'm thinking in terms of that, in terms of England, we're looking at people that did not want to talk about the war. They did not want to talk to their children either. So Peter Townsend mentions that his parents were extremely distant. So I'm thinking maybe that's probably where he got the first idea of the deaf, dumb, and blind starts in circularity with the parents in society as a whole, because the parents are also victims of the war, and their parenting is going to come from that, which is not going to be very good. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's right. So they're a mess, and so the mess is circular.
Right. So that's where I'm thinking. So that the first part is, because we think about the deaf, dumb, and blind boy, we think of just Tommy. But I'm thinking it starts with the parents, then his father walks in and he gets killed. So I think we have like many, many traumas here, because his father does die, and he sees that in the mirror, so we got that trauma. And then when the mother and the lover say you didn't hear it, you didn't see it, they're disregarding his reality. And so he can never trust his parents again. So in that moment, he needs to be somebody else. So for him to be himself or to be loved, they're mutually exclusive. So right there, the invalidation of the child starts when he's, I think he was 7 at that point.
Well, possibly. I mean, I think, again, the ambiguity of the lyrics, it lends itself to various interpretations. And again, for some, this has been a flaw, but I think it's part of the magic. You notice, and a lot of people have noticed, that within the song 1921,
right,
the killing, a murder, who's murdered who, is not actually specified. You get this delightful pronoun, it, that's repeatedly referred to. And I think that allows for the listener to think of some of the things you're touching upon. The trauma, the it, is various things, both in that moment and preceding that moment. So the trauma could be, this witnessing of this supposed crime. It could also be everything that's happened in between Tommy's birth and that point in his story.
Well, the
Because
trauma.
we don't know really about the early childhood experience. And of course, as a, what's it called, a prologue, we don't really know the stories of Tommy's parents. We get to imagine that. But it's reasonable to suppose, as you suggest, that there's a lot of trauma to go around.
Right. Heidi, you had some?
No, that's okay. I was going to say, I forgot what I was going to say, but it was something to do with the trauma, the sequence of the trauma. What you said, that when you listen to it or you read it, it's like, where was his trauma? And everybody, when they're abused or they're in a trauma situation, I don't think anybody at one point can pinpoint what that moment was that made them feel traumatized or go into whatever, a shell or whatever. I don't think there's any time that anybody gets that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm making any sense. I don't feel like I am right now.
Yeah, no,
And I don't think when Peter
that's
Townsend,
why it's complex.
I mean, when you talked to Peter Townsend, I don't think when he did that either, from what I got from the interview, is that he didn't get it really either. He was writing his story and his trauma and writing it in a play form. And however you interpret it, but then he said years later he looked at it and he interpreted it in a different way also, with a different maturity, looking at the same thing from fast forward 20 years later.
I think that's true. I think he did write, this in a fairly intuitive spirit. At the same time, I think he was quite acutely aware of how damaged the generation above him were and how difficult it was to connect with them and communicate with them. After all, he'd been writing about that as early as my generation.
Right.
The distance he felt with them. He wanted them all to fade away initially, if you recall the lyrics of that classic.
Of course.
And it's only by Tommy do you get the sense that he's now looking to, bridge the gap somewhat with that older generation.
So, Graeme, I know you're a marriage and family therapist, and you have been for a long time. I'm not sure how your schooling was, but I could tell you a little bit about mine. We spent probably maybe 1 month on cluster B personality disorders. And we spent almost no real time on what we would call today complex PTSD, like none of it. And so a lot of this has come up. I think Heidi is alluding to it too, and then I think even Peter Townsend mentions it. Like, he was alluding to things that I don't think psychology really had answers for. Because one of the lines he puts in Tommy is when he looks at his parents and he thinks, well, he knows he has to toe the line. All right, he can't talk. He can't say what he knows is the truth. But the line that Tommy says inside himself is, the guilty are saved, but are always accused by his empty eyes. So he becomes almost soulless to his parents because he can never trust them again. And I think that part of therapy was never in my schooling. That is something that Peter Townsend taught me that I could kind of look at in my own life and then do, the extra work on my own. What is your experience with that?
Gosh, that's such a complicated question, and it's apt because it's a complicated subject. I think that complex PTSD, attachment disorder, so-called personality disorder, or even to some extent psychosis, blur together as concepts. And I think one of the things that you'd have to read into a lot of our schooling, the idea that there is a relationship that individuals carry, an unconscious relationship that individuals carry between themselves and their original caregivers on a perpetual basis. So that, what you're doing as you live your life, you are holding within you what is sometimes dubbed internalized, an idea of them. You're modeling them, or you're separating from them in some way, or you're integrating some idea you have of them, or you're, as the line that you quoted suggests, you're protecting them.
Right.
Tommy's symptoms, one could argue, deflect attention away from the parents. They're kind of like how a scapegoat figure, right? In
Absolutely.
A dysfunctional family draws attention away from the systemic problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that Tommy is the scapegoat in this situation. But being the scapegoat, he's also the seer. He actually is more emotionally in tune than the parents are. I think that's something that at least I feel when I have listened to it 100,000 times and watched the movie. Whereas the parents are the ones who are much more deaf, dumb, and blind because they never actually talk to him. They never say, you know what, maybe we can talk about this in our home. They never give him the opportunity to open up as a human being. And I think because of Tommy realizes that he cannot trust his parents, why should he speak? And if they're not going to validate who he is as a human being, why should he listen? That's part of what I have out of it. What do you feel about that?
I agree, and I think that Tommy does a lovely job. Again, I agree with the idea that Townsend intuited this idea to not make explicit a lot of these things we're talking about, so that the action parallels the very phenomenon that we're observing. They're not talking about it. It is being named. It's the pronouns that take the lead, and the meaning seems drained, and we, the listener, get to imagine and read between the lines. And it is reflecting something important about how when a traumatic event or set of events happen, it damages on some fundamental level how people are communicating and even thinking about a problem.
So I think it was Freud who said, if you bury your emotions, you bury them alive, and they come out as way worse than in the beginning. And I think here we see, because it's a movie and because they really have to show a lot more, I think it does come out as him being deaf, dumb, and blind, but I think these are emotions that are buried deep, that he's forced to almost be another parent because he's protecting.
Intuitively, when you've been abused, you don't know when you're in that situation that you're being abused. You know it's not right. You know it makes no sense. But it's not until you get older. I don't know how old he was when he wrote that production, 23. But I know myself that you don't, when you're young and things are going on, you know this isn't right. This is not what an adult should be doing. So intuitively, you know that. But on a, psychological level, kids, you don't know. Then you build up these walls of trust and fear and all these other things because the people that are supposed to be your caregivers are not your caregivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all in there. There's so many lines in this movie, and the record, I want to give you this one to see what you think about it. He talks about, I believe in love, but how can those who have never seen the light be enlightened? I'm wondering if, what do you think about that? Because I know I have thoughts on it for like the last 40 years. What do you think?
Well, I have to kind of, in a way, split this into two parts. There's one that has to do with the context of that line in the opera, and another one about how that pertains to psychotherapy, I think.
Right.
In the opera, that line is being delivered from the point of view of the father, and the context is, and our comments were just sort of touching upon this. The parents don't really know what to say or what to do. They're not inviting a genuine, authentic conversation with Tommy about his life. Right. What they actually try to do is, in a conventional way, try to make him into a kind of good Christian citizen.
Right.
And Tommy rejects this because he acts out in the song Christmas. As the lines go, he pokes his tongue out at people, he picks his nose, he plays poxy pinball, if you remember those lines.
Of course.
So he's kind of acting out, right? He's having none of this conventional religiosity, which is kind of a fraud here in this context. And you can imagine, how what this means to someone like Peter Townsend, who implicitly, I don't know if he rejected Christianity, but he follows ultimately a Hindu avatar named Meher Baba,
right,
who actually is, the album is dedicated to. But so within this line is being presented, I think, in an ironic way. This is the complaint of the figure who doesn't have credibility. This is the father who has committed a crime and is, refusing to really talk about it. So his moral instruction to his son rings hollow. Now, separately, the idea that we can sort of, if we separate from that for a moment, think about what is it that brings people to enlightenment, whether we're talking about a spiritual transformation or what they achieve through psychotherapy. You go to therapy because there's some kind of light or spark within you that you want something different. You want to change, you want to talk about something. There's some inspiration that, for the most part, gets people to even go to a therapist's office.
Right.
And I think this line is about that unless there's that spark within you, how are you going to then be open to learning? How are you going to then be open to enlightenment? So the line seems to be saying something more generally about there needs to be a spark of something within an individual for them to thereafter be open to a learning process. And I guess the hopeful idea here is that even though the parents aren't seeing it because he's deaf, dumb, and blind and whatever, we know, the listener knows, there's something magical in Tommy.
Right. So what's interesting to me about that, too, is that when we hear Tommy saying things like, see me, feel me, the parents are trying to get through to him, right? They'll say things like, Tommy, can you hear me? And he's saying, see me, feel me. So he just doesn't feel comfortable in opening up in that arena. So the question partly becomes in therapy or in life with ourselves or with our own children, how do we get inside somebody to maybe improve their self-esteem? Like, I see people on a regular basis that come from poor families, that have been verbally abused, physically abused, sexually abused by their own fathers. They don't see a lot of light in this world, and then there I am, eyeball to eyeball with this human being, and then this Peter Townsend line comes up to me, and I'm thinking, how is this going to affect my therapy? Like, how do you help somebody with that spark?
Well, I think part of the message, one of the profound messages of Tommy, and before it, even more famous works like Hamlet, is the idea that what generates healing, what generates, self-worth, since you're referencing that,
right,
is, among other things, you have to have a truthful narrative. You have to have authenticity. Things have to be real.
That's
right.
right. I say that all the time. People got to trust.
And pick a contemporary event that's happening in the world. People want to know the truth.
Right.
So the lies have to stop. The narrative has to be cleaned up. And that's sort of the symbolic message of things like of Tommy and Hamlet. And if you don't have truth, you don't have order. You don't have a sense of who you are, who other people are. You have something disorganized.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the road to make this better, as in Peter Townsend would say, the amazing journey.
Yeah.
Part of that is to seek the truth. Even though you might be in an environment, whether it's your society, whether it's your government, or whether it's your parents that you might be dependent upon in that moment, to somehow be able to turn your back in some ways, turn your back even on religion if you need to, and find your truth. Do you believe that?
I do. People have to, we put a word to it in psychology, or a set of words to it. The term that I, prefer is that of separation individuation. People think of, the twofold tasks of an individual that exist in some tension between one another. On the one hand, you want to be close to people and find intimacy, but you also must find individuality, and within that you have to follow your own path.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately what happens with Tommy, for example, because unlike, say, Hamlet, he's not a tragic figure. He doesn't, he doesn't die at the end. And even though there's a revolt of his holiday camp, that part of the story, although we haven't touched on that yet, he isn't destroyed. What actually happens at the end is he's left contemplating his own inner, or as you put it, amazing journey again, which is a spiritual path. It's his own path, and it's internal.
Right. One of the things that there's so many things in this. I think it's probably the best written material that I've ever seen in my life. But one of the things that Amazing Journey Peter Townsend says is that Tommy is loving life and he's growing wise in simplicity, which is really interesting to me because everybody looks at him as, wow, that this poor kid is being destroyed, but in actuality, when he cuts himself off from the world and goes inward and sees and feels everything as a vibration, he's actually growing wise with being more simple and realizing that it's not about making money. It's not about like his mom with the fake nails and all this stuff and the jewelry. It's not about that. It's about becoming who you are. And did you take that out of it?
One thing I can remind us of, this is something I said in the presentation at that conference called Creativity and Madness. What I think is a nice message within Tommy, and specifically within the song Amazing Journey, is the idea that affliction, any kind of affliction, needn't be just a kind of condemning label. You know, you've got this idea that within an affliction is the seeds of a talent, of something special. You were touching on it earlier with the idea that Tommy becomes a great witness, you know, to things, in part because of his separation, because of his isolation. So, you know, and we think that, you know, in a contemporary way, when we treat, say, a kid, a teenager, for example, with attention deficit disorder, you know, one of the positive ways we can look at that is that attention deficit disorder needn't only be thought of as a disorder. It can also be something that can be adapted into a strength. You know, somebody's creativity, you know, can be molded through their, you know, unfortunate tendency to be distractible. Something that is, on the one hand, thought of as a deficit can, in another context, become a strength. And I think Tommy conveys that message.
Well,
Absolutely.
not to get off the subject, I'm going to just for a second, but Down syndrome babies are a good example of what you're talking about, because years ago they didn't treat those babies right. They kind of, I don't know, just put them away, sort of. Where now that they're working with the Down syndrome babies, they're finding out that they're highly intelligent and that they can learn. They just learn in a different way, instead of being disposable or they're no of use because they have a disability or they're whatever. They've realized how special these children are now that they're working with their problem.
That's interesting, Heidi. I didn't know that.
Well, it is. I have some clients that have Down syndrome babies, and I was just talking about it today to one of my clients, and she has her son. But she said, 20 years ago, these children were put in homes or they were labeled as retarded, and they just, put them off to the side and said, you have a problem, we don't want to deal with it. Where now, fast forward 20 years later, she has a son who, you can communicate with. He plays like normal children. He does things that, you would, Down syndrome babies, if they were born, 25 years prior, were considered disposable. They weren't treated as being special, where you look at these children and they are special and they deserve, what everybody else. It's just that they have to get it in a different way, and you have to have the patience to know that you have to treat a child like that differently. It's the same thing with Asperger's type people too. They're highly intelligent, but they're so socially awkward that most people would just choose to, well, let's ignore that because you're so different. I don't want to deal with that.
And the disability becomes somehow an essence of what's special. Again, to the opera, Tommy's disability, his deaf, dumb, and blind condition, doesn't get in the way of him becoming a pinball wizard. In fact, the opposite is true. It enhances his ability in playing that game, that makes him a celebrity, and that ultimately, draws followers to him. And that's an implied theme within the opera, not one that's made explicit. His disability is the essence of that special power that he has.
So one of the things that always stands out too about this is the song Pinball Wizard. So let's talk about the most popular song from it.
Yeah.
To me, it's not just playing the game pinball, right? Like, we could replace it with, Graeme being a psychotherapist, right? Or, you being an author. To me, it's about maybe Peter Townsend being a guitar wizard. It stands for finding that spark, that meaning and purpose in your life that makes you stand out and special, something that you enjoy. So it really has nothing to do with pinball. For me,
it's a metaphor. I mean,
exactly.
And the eccentricity of it is, I think, part of an inside joke. Whoever heard of a pinball champion in 1969? Well, whoever heard of a rock and roll star in 1945? So I think that's a big part of it. And I think
that's kind of the way he was able to slip it under the radar, so to speak, to get the average person to listen to the song without ever really knowing that it's really about meaning and purpose in your life. And that's kind of where that is. Here's another thought I had.
Yeah.
So he is blind and he's deaf. So why would he enjoy pinball? Right? Like, in that sense. So I have the answer, at least in my brain, and I'll tell you what I think it is.
Okay.
It's the feel of the game.
Yeah.
There's no part in the opera where it says he has lost the ability to feel. So
Right.
it's the pinball machine, to be able to push onto it, to be able to press the buttons. But more importantly, when people love him for being so good, and he doesn't even know what he's really good at because he can't see, it's that the people crowd him and they touch him and they put their hands on his back. And there's that scene when he wins that championship against Elton John. They're putting him on their, he's on people's shoulders, and he's doing that, like that, what do you call it? Crowd surfing. It's the being the touched, and that part, as exciting as it is, everybody thinks, wow, it's this exciting part. He's playing against Elton John and he's winning a pinball match. To me, the first time I saw that, I almost wanted to cry, because to me it was about he was finally being touched, and it's something that his parents didn't even do. So I'm wondering how you felt about that.
Well, I absolutely agree that, the piece that the one disability he doesn't have is he hasn't lost the ability to feel. And being touched is very important to him, and part of the value of pinball, and this is partly in the lyrics, and also, if you ever read interviews of Townsend when he was writing Tommy, he keeps referring to vibration.
Mm.
And I think vibration as a form of touch is something that's implied here as being very important to him, and also to his audience. And if you think just a little bit also about the broader legacy of The Who and their audience, if you were going to one of their early concerts, you wouldn't just hear their music. You'd feel it because of the vibration and the sheer noise.
Right.
They were, certainly in that era, overpowering, to an audience. And the intensity, I think, that early audience experienced in them is somehow relevant to this discussion. You'd feel Tommy both as a character, and you'd feel the noise of The Who. And so you'd feel Pete Townsend in a kind of layered way here.
So to touch on another song that I think is great is the song I'm a Sensation. Now, I've seen some people write some things about Tommy, and they use Tommy as like there's this narcissism feel to it. And I can kind of go along with that a little bit, but when I think about really a narcissist, I think about somebody who feels a little bit better when they can hurt somebody else. So I don't really see that in Tommy. But what I do see is this, what I like to call an adversity bounce, to where throughout the work, he's talking about see me, feel me, and that never really happens. So he takes the matter into his own hands and he becomes good at something. So in Sensation, he says, soon you'll see me. Soon you'll feel me. Right? So he kind of takes it, and to me, that's him getting his empowerment. He doesn't have to ask you to see him and feel him. He's saying, you have no choice now. You will see me.
Yeah.
You will feel me. I'm famous. I'm a sensation. You will worship me.
But isn't that an adaptation to abuse to some degree, Graeme? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I just thought about that when you were saying that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say again.
When you have to be a superstar and you come from abuse, isn't that a form of like some kind of narcissism that stems from abuse of some degree, or no?
Well, I'm not sure if this answers your question, Heidi, but I do think there is elements of that within this portion of the opera where Tommy is now, and just to touch on an item of plot, about 2/3 of the way through, your audience may or may not know that Tommy regains his sight and voice, right? He can speak and he can sing through the song "I'm Free," because a totem of narcissism, the mirror, is smashed. And that kind of conjures Brothers Grimm fairy tales, that idea of you break the spell of narcissism through the smashing of its symbol, being the mirror. And what happens is he is being touched and felt by the audience. And I think that actually takes a little bit of an ugly tone if you think of the lyrics of "We're not going to take it," wherein actually those followers threaten to rape him. And that's a little bit reenacting of what we think happens earlier in the opera with Uncle Ernie, possibly the Cousin Kevin character, who are furthering the abuse of the denial of truth by abusing him physically and sexually. So there's that sense of what goes around comes around a lot in Tommy. So that feeling him is both positive and it has a darker turn as well, I think. Joe, to your earlier point, I don't think it's true that Tommy doesn't seem to be anything like a malignant narcissist. There are snatches of him becoming a little bit exhibitionistic and a kind of a haughty leader, a didactic leader who wants to prescribe his former symptoms to his followers at the end. Put on your eye shades, put in your earplugs, you know where to put your cork, put the cork. He gets a bit bossy, and they, of course, revolt against that. But on the whole, I think of Tommy as a bit more of a kind of schizoid character, a withdrawn, introverted figure, and closer to what Sigmund Freud actually was writing about with respect to what narcissism was, which is less about the grandiosity and more about this withdrawal of the energy from the other. It's the introversion of Tommy that seems narcissistic, not that he, for the most part, is looking to devalue other people.
It's a survival thing
too. So much that.
It's a survival thing, and it's an adaptation, I think, too.
Yeah, of course.
But
of course.
I don't.
Yeah. It is an adaptation for him to take on this role, and you have a sense that when Tommy, breaks free of the mirror, and when he initially goes inward and then he's starting to come out, that he's figuring it out as he goes along, and he's not necessarily getting it right. And that's the idea at the end, that he's not the perfect figure. He is flawed. He is, a strong figure, but he can also be vulnerable. And that's a delightful kind of imperfection. We can resonate with that. Kind of like you, Joe, when you were witnessing that film of Roger Daltrey singing at Woodstock, and you were moved by that idea of this strong kind of macho guy, accessing, this vulnerable side of himself and expressing it in a lovely way.
It's one of the things that you mentioned too that I really like is that when I think of Tommy, I think of someone who is flawed and who actually is trying to help people, but he's not an expert on everybody else's life. He's an expert on himself. So he's trying to make people be deaf, dumb, and blind and play pinball. I see it as not because he's like the only messiah in the world. I think it's the only thing he knows. And then when they revolt, to me, that's the way Peter Townsend always said, is that you need to revolt against authority. You need to find your own voice. And I think that's what these people did. So in my way, I think the way I look at it is he actually did teach these people because they did revolt against a false messiah. So in a roundabout way, he actually did his job.
Yeah.
And
he's learning as he goes along, but they revolted against a false side within him, and it's a learning experience for Tommy.
So we're running out of time, so I know I'm trying to shoehorn a bunch of stuff in here, so we'll have to have you on again if you don't mind. But one of the things too is that in psychology we talk a lot about being internally validated and intrinsically motivated, right? Like these strong people, it's all about them, and we don't really need others that much. And at least that's the people I'm around. That's what they push. And I don't think Peter Townshend's pushing that at all. I think he is saying that I am me because of you. Like when we listening to you, it says listening to you, I get the music. Gazing at you, I get the heat. So our environment does shape us, and I think he's being very honest and vulnerable about that, whereas I think a lot of therapists are not. I think they're saying, well, it doesn't matter what other human beings say. It should never affect you. How do you feel about that part?
Well, first of all, about Peter Townsend and The Who, I mean, there are lots of things that I, and I'm sure you too, Joe, love about The Who. But top of the list for me is that more than anyone else, in my opinion, in rock and roll, Peter Townsend articulated the idea that without the audience, we're nothing. You know, it's the interaction with the audience that matters. He wasn't just an introverted artist writing about himself. It was necessary for him to reflect his audience and what their dreams were, what their aspirations were, what they want from the performer, as well as what he wants from them. And he articulated that dynamic, in my opinion, more powerfully than any other rock and roll artist of his era.
Absolutely.
So that's my first thought. And with respect to psychotherapy, I mean, that's an idea that has been influential to me in psychotherapy. People need connection. They need fellowship. They need to work through, conflicts, not just separate from conflicts. Sometimes, to speak to Heidi's points about adaptation and what you were saying earlier, sometimes people need to go internally and escape from, danger before they can reemerge and figure out how to adapt to the world. But ultimately, that is the goal. You don't withdraw from society.
Right.
You don't just, tell the elder generation to fade away, as Townsend originally did in my generation. No, you got to come back to them.
Yes.
And figure out how you're going to get along with them.
And we don't have much time, so I'm going to throw this in real quick to see what you think. Again, one of the most moving things I've ever seen in cinema was at the end when they did reject Tommy, and he's trying to get out of there, and the pinball machines are on fire and all this, and obviously it's all done. And he reverts back to the see me, feel me. But what he does is he sees his mother and his father, who he had obviously lifelong problems with. And you see him, and he goes over to their hands, and you see a close-up on their wedding rings. And what he does is he places their hands together. And so he forgives them in that moment, knowing that they did the best they could. And once he had that forgiveness, he was able to walk away and then climb the mountain. So I was, I said, we have this thought sometimes that we want our parents or authority or whoever to fade away. But I love the way, in the end, he understands that forgiveness is really the way. How do you feel about that?
It's a lovely moment that actually isn't in the original album. You have to imagine that Townsend and director Ken Russell collaborated to some degree on, representing that element, about the previous generation, and what we imagine about his parents, Townsend's parents perhaps, their disconnect, right, their pervasive trauma, and how they have that lovely, as you put it, forgiving moment.
Right. So I think we're at the end of the road here. I could talk to you forever, so do you want to come back at another time?
Oh, man, I would love to come back.
Excellent.
To keep talking about this or whatever, right, related to The Who and psychology. Quadrophenia is another one we could talk a lot about, I think.
If you want to do a talk, or we can do a talk on, let's see, quadrophenia, if we can go on tour together. What do you think? I already started writing it, so I already got half the work done. If you want.
He's put you on the spot.
We'd have to talk about how our first tour would have to be not quite as disastrous as the Who's original Quadrophenia tour. I'm assuming you're going to get the inside joke of that, Joe.
We need a drummer, someone who can play.
That we pluck from the audience, right?
Yeah.
Ava. Oh, Ellen.
All right. So, Graeme, tell everybody where they can reach you, or anything that you would like to sell, or anything like that. We'll leave the floor open to you.
Wow. Sal, I would like, if there's anyone listening who is interested or knows a publisher, Graeme Daniels is writing a book about the subject we've been talking about. It's about the art and psychology of Tommy. If you put in those words into a YouTube engine, you'd get to watch my talk from Santa Fe. It's pretty well produced video, I think. I have a website called Self in Addiction, the word self, SELFIN, and then the word addiction. That's my website for my practice. And yeah, start clicking likes and on YouTube videos and things like that. And if you're interested, you know, one of these days you might find a book on the art and psychology of Tommy on a bookshelf.
Excellent. So thank you for being our guest, and I'll email you later so we can work on this Quadrophenia tour.
Talk to you too, Heidi.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care now. This has been the Rise Above show. Thank you very much.